Thank you very much, Eric, and thanks for giving a plug to my good work in the panel that we're about to start. Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we heard from Matt Borges, chairman of the Ohio State Republican Party, on how, from a Republican perspective, this election can affect Canada-U.S. relations. Now we're going to hear from one of the leaders of the Hillary for America campaign and somebody that many of you will know going back a long way, the Honorable James J. Blanchard. Jim Blanchard has notoriety in Ohio, not only because he has wonderful relatives who live here and who try to stick up for him here in this great state, even though he was a Michigan State grad originally. But one of the reasons he's so well known is that early in his career, when he was a young congressman from Michigan, looked exactly the same, but was a young congressman from Michigan, he was the leader in the effort in the 1980s to save Chrysler with a bailout that helped put them back on the road in the Lee Iacocca days. And he really helped turn that company's story around. He, on the strength of this and his other leadership in the state, became governor of Michigan, and he made a number of brilliant decisions during his tenure as governor. One not so good decision in that he hired me as a junior functionary in his administration. That lapse in judgment, may have led partly to his changing careers. Bill Clinton, who he helped elect, a fellow member of the Democratic Leadership Committee and a leading fellow governor, helped elect Bill Clinton, who turned around and made him U.S. ambassador to Canada. He served in that role while I went on to become an academic, and soon we were working together again, and I constantly remind him, unfortunately, that he knows me. But he was kind enough to acknowledge me here so that I could include him. He is the co-chairman of the Canada-U.S. Law Institute, which has one of its home bases at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. He's a great friend of Ohio. He's a great friend of America and a great friend of Hillary Clinton. And with that, let me ask you, Governor Blanchard, to share your thoughts on how her campaign is going and what it means for Canada.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Here we are in Archie Griffin Ballroom. I'm tempted to sing Hail to the Victors, but I won't because I'm a Spartan. And as my cousin Ann and my cousin David and their friend Shaw, and I just met other friend No, my mother was born in Columbus. My relatives were from Ohio. They graduated from Ohio State. Proud Buckeyes. And as a kid, all I could hear about was Ohio State football. But we ended up living in Detroit, and so I remember my mother, who wasn't prone to biases, said, there's two places you can go to college. You can go to Ohio State or Michigan State, but you will never set foot in Ann Arbor. So I don't know where she was normally open-minded and liberal and tolerant, humanitarian, but she seemed to have this despise for, I asked her once, what was it about the University of Michigan? It's a great place. I mean, I'm governor of the state at that point. What? She said, oh, they were just, I could always tell when we played them in football. They won all the time. And they were loud and boisterous and pushy and arrogant. I never got over it. I said, oh, okay, well, that hasn't changed too much. But anyway, I am really delighted to be here. And, Eric, thank you for your good remarks. I should tell you that I can't see all the faces. I know about half the audience because of the lights, the floodlights here. But I really have enjoyed working with most of you off and on on U.S.-Canada matters for really the last 25 years. And Dan, thank you for helping, and Ohio State for organizing this conference. I think bringing all these different groups together is really, really important. And I certainly appreciate it as a friend of Canada-U.S. relations. I'm fortunately pleased to have sat next to our distinguished ambassador, His Excellency Bruce Heyman. He and I, of course, now have a bond of love of Canada, of the Canada-U.S. partnership. I know many of you heard from Ambassador Heyman this morning, but he's doing a fabulous job. Thank you for your energy, and also give my regards to your wife, who attacks this opportunity with equal or even greater energy. Thank you. And I think in fact, he describes it as a love affair, and I think particularly with the new prime minister who you spent a lot of time with when he wasn't prime minister, it probably is truly a love affair in the job and the relations all over Canada. Believe it or not, I was ambassador in the last century now, it seems. Wow. And what an opportunity it was. Let me first, though, say this. George Voinovich, the former governor, senator, mayor, passed away this week. And he was a great friend of Canada and a great friend of U.S.-Canada relations and an outstanding public servant. And he passed at an all too young age. But he was a friend of mine, not a close friend, but a friend. I worked with him. I admired him. He was a wonderful gift that Ohio gave to our country and our world. And he will be missed. People like him who could work across the aisle, who were open-minded, who were bipartisan, who were practical, as you know, are sorely needed in our politics today. And let me also say we lost Gordie Howe from Saskatchewan, but Mr. Hockey, and that's another passing. And I'm just glad, Ambassador Heyman, that we're going to name that new bridge between Detroit and Windsor, that critical piece of infrastructure, the Gordie Howe International Bridge. And that, by the way, was a decision by Prime Minister Harper of Canada. It could have easily come from all of us in Michigan, but we're just delighted. And by the way, we're delighted that the Ohio government, the legislature and the governor, supported that bridge wholeheartedly. It was really important, as did most of the legislatures in the region. Let me also say, as I said, there's so many of you here that I know. I can't name all of you, but I do appreciate the fact you're willing to listen to me one more time. My cousins had to listen to me as a kid, but I have no idea what I said, so please don't repeat it. But all I can tell you is that, you know, as the ambassador pointed out, we cooperate with Canada on virtually everything. You can name, well, a space station or policing the streets of Haiti or trade or Great Lakes water quality, you name it, whether it was in Afghanistan or the new bridge. It's a partnership that works. It's unparalleled in the universe, as far as I know. Let me also say that, generally speaking, it would be easy for me to say that, you know, if the Democrats win, Canada will be better off than if the Republicans win. Of course, I feel that way. But generally speaking, over the years, presidents of both parties have been pretty good to Canada. They viewed Canada as a valuable partner. And when they didn't know a lot about Canada, they learned it pretty quickly. I mean, whether it was Ronald Reagan working on acid rain with Mulrooney, or George Bush trying to negotiate trade, which was finished by Bill Clinton with Canada, there's been a great deal of cooperation. But I want to talk a little bit about the election, and then Chris is going to ask me questions. And he has not given me what they are. They're usually pretty good and tough questions. But let me just say this, that the presidential candidate, this is a very unusual year to say the least. You have one candidate, Hillary, who's been beat up by the media and the Republicans for 24 years, is still standing. In fact, they had a hearing on Benghazi, and she went 11 hours with a congressional committee, and when she finished, she proved that she was qualified not only to be president, but commander-in-chief and prime minister. And the Republican committee looked like a bunch of buffoons. As a matter of fact, anybody watched those hearings? It went on 11 hours. Anybody here watch that? Some of you did. I know you would probably agree with what I said. It was an incredible performance, and anyone who watched that would definitely want to vote for her, in my opinion. Of course, I'm biased. But what's interesting about presidential elections is you're going to see a lot of polls, you're going to see a lot of data, and it will show it reasonably close, I think, for quite a while. It'll go up and down. But what really matters will be the Electoral College, as you know. You need 270 votes. If you look at the last 6 elections, the Democrats have carried states that comprise 242 electoral votes. It is likely that Hillary starts out with 242 electoral votes. She only needs then 28 more. If she carries Florida, it's over with. Ohio and another small state, it's over with. I think the battleground will be Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, but places like Virginia and Colorado. But the bottom line is she needs very few electoral votes to win this, starting right out. She starts with 242. Trump starts out with 102. Now, the Hillary I know, look, I've known the Clintons since 1982. We have not had anyone in modern history as qualified to be president as Hillary Clinton. I mean, nor have we had someone as obviously unqualified as her opponent. I mean, it's really clear. And anybody who focuses on that, if it matters, and I don't think it matters with a huge number of people, but if it matters, qualifications and experience are going to be the trump card Hillary has on Trump, without a doubt in my mind. What's interesting about Hillary is she has devoted her life to public service, to children, to families, to health care, to women's rights, to peace in the world, whether it's talking about women's rights or human rights in China, or as First Lady championing the new child health insurance program, which now covers 8 million kids with health care. There's a long list of accomplishments and achievements and commitments of Hillary Clinton in public service, whether it's as First Lady of Arkansas or First Lady in the U.S. or a senator or an ambassador. In fact, it's really interesting. As ambassador, Henry Kissinger said of Hillary, she ran the State Department in the most effective way that I have ever seen. And that's from a Republican-appointed Secretary of State. I mean, she has done it all. As a senator, she worked across the aisle, by the way. It's interesting, most of the Republican senators enjoyed working with her. They don't want to say that now because it looks like they're for her and they feel they need to be loyal to their nominee, or at least tokenly loyal. But the fact is she worked with all of them very, very well, including providing health care for National Guard members, Army Reserve members, Air Force Reserve, and veterans' families. I mean, there's just a lot of different examples. What I think we're going to find as the campaign unfolds is that in today's world, a person can say, or a group can say, anything they want, whether it's true or not, could be totally made up, and it gets spread on the media or Twitter or the internet. They can make up the most unbelievable things, and that's what's going on. And so I think we're going to have to, the Hillary campaign, is going to have to focus on facts. By the way, facts, the Michigan unemployment rate now is 4.7%. That would be, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana would be absolutely nowhere without Obama's administration's auto rescue. Remember, the Congress refused to enact a rescue of the auto companies. So he ended up having to cram down a quick bankruptcy to General Motors and Chrysler, which also saved all those suppliers, and Ford Motor, and actually suppliers to Honda, Toyota, and Nissan as well. And there is no way that John Kasich, who, by the way, on paper was clearly the most qualified Republican running for president, I might add, without a doubt, at least on paper, the most qualified by far of the Republican field. But there's no way John Kasich, or in Michigan, Rick Snyder, or Scott Walker, any of them would have been reelected if we hadn't had the resurgence of manufacturing and autos, if we hadn't had Barack Obama as president of the United States. That is a fact in terms of the auto rescue. But people are going to talk about Bill Clinton's record, and I noticed in the polling data in Michigan that voters 45 and older were strongly for Hillary. But voters 40 and under were not. They were going for Bernie for a lot of reasons, an exciting campaign, a good campaign, a campaign based on a lot of real issues that need to be addressed, including the crushing student loan debt. But what I found was the people who were adults during the Bill Clinton economy were strongly for both Hillary and had a high favorability of Bill Clinton, and there's a reason for that. During the Bill Clinton presidency, and these are facts that are going to have to be pounded away in the media. During the Bill Clinton presidency, 23 million new jobs were created. We had record home ownership. We had rising middle-class incomes and wages the first time in years. We had a federal budget surplus. We brought peace to Northern Ireland. We ended the genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Basically, we had peace and prosperity. Not perfection, but a great record. And I'd say he's going to be a pretty good advisor, Chris, to Hillary Clinton on economic issues, and she has indicated such. And of course, I mentioned Hillary's record, and I think it's been a sterling record as well. And I mentioned briefly the Obama auto rescue. Yeah, that should not be taken for granted. The president inherited a deep financial crisis and a recession, probably the worst since the Great Depression, and he brought us through that. And it wasn't just the auto rescue that Congress refused to do, which was controversial, but it was really more than that. In fact, he supported strongly the presidential permit for the Gordie Howe Bridge. He ruled in Michigan that the money that Canada's front-loading on the bridge can be used for $2 billion of highway money. He cared enough to try to cover all those Americans without health care. And now I think about 18 million are covered that weren't by affordable health care. It's a pretty long list of accomplishments and important things for our country and for working with Canada as well. In fact, I don't know how many presidents tried to cover people with health insurance and weren't able to do it. So I'm reminded that people take all that for granted. And he did all the while that all of a sudden, after he won, people decided he wasn't born in the United States. They claimed he was born in Africa or in Indonesia or somewhere else. But dealing with Hillary, and then I'm going to stop briefly, Hillary has spent an enormous amount of time in Canada. She hasn't just given commencement speeches in Halifax or other speeches in Calgary or Vancouver, but as a child, her family took her across Canada on the Trans-Canada Highway. When I was ambassador and they had their first official visit, she skated in the canal. I mean, she probably knows more about Canada and the different provinces and the differences and, like, for example, the uniqueness of Quebec and the importance of Quebec as a founding nation in Canada as anyone could who's running for office. Of course, she dealt with it as Secretary of State, not just as First Lady. But what I found was really interesting was that probably one of the most critical moments in all of Canadian history, in the run-up to the October 30 referendum, Quebec referendum, October 30, 1995, Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton played a very key role in supporting Canadian unity. And I outline it in my book called Behind the Embassy Door, Canada, Clinton, and Quebec. 35 cents, Amazon. I know you're listening now, thank you. I talk about it there, not in the detail I want to mention now, but the bottom line was this. The U.S., during the Clinton years, we were able to move the U.S. from kind of a studied neutrality on the Quebec issue to strong support for a united and strong Canada. That we moved gradually but clearly, and we made it clear whether it was the president's speech before Parliament or in the run-up to the referendum. In the run-up to the referendum, and those who are younger will not know this, but this Quebec referendum, which was called, for sovereignty, but some would say separatism, some would say sovereignty, a new relationship. That referendum lost by very few votes. The Federalists, the pro-United Canada group, barely survived that election. And on the eve of the election, we knew several things. One, we knew it would be very, very close. And we'd done polling. We now, the U.S., had done polling, actually secret polling, I can now reveal, that showed Bill Clinton was not only popular in Canada, but he was more popular in Quebec than any Canadian politician or Quebec politician. Probably that smile, that charisma, whatever it was. But they loved Bill Clinton. And so we thought if Bill Clinton could say something positive about strongly supporting a united Canada, it would help in that referendum. But we also knew that you don't do that unless the leader of the country wants you to do it. And the people in the Prime Minister's office said, it's so close, it would really be good if you could do more. If the president could say something positive about a united Canada. And so on the eve of that election, There was a United Nations meeting, and Bill and Hillary were in New York for the meeting with Jean and Aline Chrétien, Prime Minister, for a meeting. And the Prime Minister and Aline, both, to Bill and Hillary, said, "We want your help. It is so close. We could lose. Our country hangs in the balance. Please help us." And we'd already met with our leaders in the Situation Room in the White House and said, as long as you say something positive about United Canada, it can't hurt. You are highly regarded in Quebec. As long as you don't preach them or be negative, it can't hurt. We need to weigh in. And I will tell you that Hillary Clinton, standing there with the Prime Minister's wife and Bill Clinton, said, "We've got to do it, Bill. We've got to do it, and we will do it." And they did it. And I won't read you the statement he made, but I'll tell you, it was on the 25th of October. The vote was on the 30th, and the federal forces, the unity forces, prevailed. And Clinton's role in that and Hillary's support of it was impactful enough that the Prime Minister called me and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you please thank the President for what he did." And he could have easily said, "Please thank the President and Hillary," because I know they were a team on this issue. I think that speaks volumes about her commitment to this relationship that we talk about, that we love. And what I've just told you has not really been written extensively, but it is true. In fact, I referenced it in my book, but only briefly. This was an important moment. This election is going to be important. And you may want to ask me why I don't think that Mr. Trump is qualified, because I don't. The kinds of statements he's made over and over that are not true, that are wild, that feed suspicion, it's really outright. I don't care whether you say John McCain is not a hero, he's a loser, or you accuse Ted Cruz's father of being involved in the Kennedy assassination. I mean, the stuff is incredible. Whether it was implying that Justice Scalia was murdered or smothered, or that Mitt Romney is a choker, or refusing to denounce the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, then claimed his earpiece was bad, or saying the Mexican government only sends bad Mexicans to the U.S., those are the rapists and the murderers and the thieves. I mean, this list goes on and on and on. Then there's the wall. All right, people build walls. The Soviets build walls, folks. Or rounding up people of another religion. That was Germany in the 30s and 40s. I mean, come on, this is not a situation where you can tolerate a guy who said in January, "I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody, and I wouldn't lose any voters." It's like incredible. Now, I know you're going to think I'm unduly partisan. Yeah, why not? Just as I was in favor of Canadian unity as well. Yes, you had the Republican chair here yesterday. I'm sure he was pretty soft-pedaling on Trump. The best that could happen to Trump would probably be to put John Kasich on the ticket and then announce this was all a joke. I just want to see how gullible everybody was. We'll now make Kasich president. At least we got a guy who was in Congress and a governor and seems to have some heart for people. Anyway, that's my story today, folks. I'll try to be more blunt in the Q&A.
Well, thank you, Governor. An excellent presentation, a great start. I want to pick up with something that I think a lot of people have been thinking about this election, and I think in a bipartisan way. Where do you think we're going on trade? This has seemed to be a year where there's been a lot of protectionist sentiment out there in the electorate as well as in some of the campaigns, and Secretary Clinton has been equivocal about NAFTA and also talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership as maybe not being a deal that she'd want to pursue in its current form. Where do you think we're going on trade? And for Canadians who depend so much on the U.S. for trade, what should they be thinking?
Let me just mention, I'm wearing these shoes because I have plantar fasciitis. I'm not trying to be cool here. These are good on my feet. But anyway, basically really since Franklin Roosevelt, no matter what they say, the presidents always end up being pro-trade expansion, either party. When you have populism, however, it becomes protectionism, it becomes isolationism, it can become nativism. And we've had a lot of that in this campaign, particularly by two other candidates. So I do not speak for Hillary on trade. I know this. I heard her in Detroit at a union meeting, and she said, my position on trade is going to be very, very simple. I'm not going to support any trade agreement where I can't look workers in the eye and say, this will create jobs. You will be protected. This will lead to jobs and economic growth. That's kind of her policy as I heard it. But there may be other position papers. Others may have that here, and you will want to discuss it. But I know it's a concern. I also know her high regard for Canada. And, you know, she views Canada as our natural and obvious and closest partner.
We were talking about the auto bailout during the Obama administration. One of the things that always struck me about that moment, which echoed your own career so well, was that Germany tried to see if they could sell Opel to the Russians. Mexico said there wasn't anything they could do, but Canada stepped up to join in the bailout and contribute some proportional cash. Do you think that Canadians get enough credit for having been involved in that?
No, I don't think Canadians get enough credit. I should have mentioned it. It's something I do mention at a lot of speeches. Both Ottawa and Toronto Queen's Park provided loans to the rescue along with the U.S. government. And autos are, frankly, very important to Canada, particularly in Ontario and manufacturing. And I know the Canadian leadership is worrying about the impact of different plant decisions, right, Your Excellency? And they're watching that carefully, want to make sure that Canada has its fair share of auto jobs, both by the major companies and the suppliers as well. So, but a healthy auto industry generally really helps Canada and helps particularly Ontario, but helps Canada. And so they don't get enough credit. And let me just mention, too, I'm working on something. That's why the bridge is so important in terms of Detroit-Windsor. That's the busiest trade corridor really in the world. And it's the lifeblood of manufacturing and tourism and agriculture. So that's why Canada has felt so strongly about it, fortunately. We in Michigan are developing a new center for intelligent and safe vehicles at Willow Run near Ann Arbor. Those are they talk about being driverless. Well, we're not going to have driverless vehicles for a long time, but you can have safe, connected, autonomous vehicles that will really improve the quality of life and fuel economy and everything, reduce congestion and be much safer. So we are going to build a whole new testing center, a national center in Willow Run. The state of Michigan is solidly behind it, so are the auto companies. And Canada is going to be part of this. I don't know exactly how or what or when, but I know in particular Ontario is talking to the state of Michigan about being part of it because it needs to be a North American center for safe and intelligent vehicles. I think it's officially called the American Center for Mobility, but we want to make sure it gets named pretty quickly the North American Center for Mobility, because that line between Oshawa and Detroit and Flint and Ann Arbor and Lansing is really the cradle, not only of cooperation between our countries, but the cradle of advanced manufacturing in North America.
Another question, and I remember when you were governor, you were really an environmental governor. And in the last few years, mostly surrounding the Keystone Pipeline, we've had some tough debates with the Canadians about the environment, about the oil sands. Energy is a big part of our trading relationship, not just oil, but hydroelectricity and other things. Where are we in terms of environmental cooperation, and where do you think Secretary Clinton, as president, might be on some of these issues and cooperation with the Canadians?
Well, as you pointed out, I mean, first of all, we have an incredible energy relationship. Most of you know that Canada is the largest provider of energy to the United States, both oil, gas, hydro, uranium. But the big stuff would be oil, natural gas, and hydro. Hydro from Quebec, as a matter of fact. That's going to grow. What's interesting, having looked at the sweep of history. I was elected to Congress in 1974. My cousin Dave actually drove up with a contribution on the eve of the election from Columbus to Michigan to make sure that the Buckeyes infiltrated our Congress. But that was the year after the Arab oil embargo, and no one ever thought we could become energy self-sufficient again. And here we are, both in the U.S. and North America. To the degree we want to, we are and will be energy self-sufficient by 2020. Bill Burlow is here from Enbridge. The Enbridge brings more oil from Canada to the U.S. than most countries provide, and also natural gas, but there are other companies as well. I think it was a shame that the Keystone Pipeline issue got hijacked the relationship, because it was one of many, many issues, and it became, unfortunately, it became symbolic for, do you care about climate change or not? And I think the president got put in a box to come out against it, to show that he really cares deeply about climate change, as if he needed to prove that. He was on the record in every which way you could have on climate change, including dealing with Canada on climate change. So I view oil in Canada and gas in Canada and hydro as a blessing to the United States, an absolute blessing. And I do. And so I'm troubled by the fact that too many Republicans seem to be anti-science and anti-intellectual, and too many Republicans seem to be anti-technology and anti-business. And that's a bad combination when you're dealing with practicalities of the economy. But I think things will work out. I noticed some of the things that Hillary's documents say on her website, which were sent to me, deal with the importance of the integrated energy market, the importance of the integrated infrastructure, and the importance of cooperation on energy and climate change. I think that will grow, and I think the Prime Minister really highlighted that in the meeting. Did he not, Ambassador? He highlighted the cooperation with President Obama on climate change when he had this fabulous official visit to Washington. That will continue.
One of the things that was interesting about this campaign has been that we had a few candidates in both parties, actually, including Martin O'Malley on the Democratic side and Marco Rubio on the Republican side, who were of a younger generation. But our nominees look like they'll be baby boomers. What do you think the key is to reaching out to the millennial voter? And what do we offer them for the future of the economy? How do we get them excited about, if not politics, about what America can do?
That's a really good question. Two people who were my advisors when I ran for governor wrote the two seminal works on millennials, Morley Winograd and Mike Hayes. They tend to be very tolerant, open-minded, community-oriented. They see community service today as more valuable than political service. Obviously, they're burdened by huge student debt, and the rising cost of tuitions is really unconscionable. In Michigan, we started the Michigan Education Trust when I was governor, which was the first prepaid tuition program. Very successful, but it was designed to deal with the fact that people are graduating with crushing debt, and it's, of course, far worse now. So we need to deal with things like student loans and student debt. We really need to find ways to have the two parties work together, which happened when I was in Congress. It doesn't happen now. The people who go to Congress now don't know any better than to just fight for the sake of fighting. Politics has become very tribal in the sense that instead of viewing the other side as the loyal opposition, we demonize them. And we have our own network, our own TV cable networks to demonize each other. And pretty soon you have people saying, I don't like my nominee, but I'll vote my party. Hey, folks, that's nonsense. That's nonsense. Or they're both bad, so I'll vote my party. That's nonsense. That is a lazy person's position. Chris, when I was a young organizer, George Wallace won the Democratic primary in Michigan. How many people remember the name George Wallace? All right. He won the Democratic primary in Michigan over George McGovern and Hubert Humphrey. It was an open primary, and we had a lot of people that weren't maybe Democrats voting. If anybody thinks that myself or Sandra Levin or Gary Peters or Debbie Stabenow or Carl Levin would have supported Wallace if he had been our nominee. No way. We would either support a third party or we would have probably supported Richard Nixon. We would never have supported George Wallace. And so I don't buy the argument that, by some that say I have to support my party. What I'm finding is people saying, Chris, my people who are not in office are saying they won't vote. They'll either vote for Hillary or they won't vote. They'll vote for the Republicans down the line, or they'll vote for Gary Johnson or somebody. But I'm not hearing that from the officials. They're scared. They're frightened. They don't want the Tea Party mad at them. But they know better, so I don't know what we do there. All I know is the young generation needs to start hearing people like us saying we want the parties to work together. We don't like the demonizing cable TV business. We'd like to see authentic reapportionment of districts so that the selection of members of Congress are more fair and representative. And we need a president that will talk about that. So I'm hoping Hillary, I think she will. I think her theme is going to be One America, which is we're all Americans. Everybody counts. Everybody belongs. This is a country for liberty and justice for all, not just some, all. And I think that's going to be a compelling message along with economic growth and jobs for Hillary. But I'd like to hear it from the others.
Absolutely. Well, you acknowledged earlier that we have a pretty distinguished audience, and they are a little bit hard to see with the lights, but I want to give them a chance to jump in with some questions. And we'll do what we did yesterday, which is I'll try to take a couple and then let you field them. There's a gentleman over here. Is there a microphone for him?
Maybe also, I see Doug George right here, of course, because he's so important to us in Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, Kentucky. But there's so many others here. Former Consul General, I think I saw John Tennant. The consulate over here is people are, anyway, you've got a distinguished group. Taychek, Annie Schneider of MSU, did I say Spartans? Yeah, anyway.
It's a very distinguished audience. Let's take a question from this gentleman.
First, thank you for participating in saving Chrysler back then. My previous career, I ran the Chrysler business for a Tier 1 parts supplier. Wonderful customer, $300 million a year account. And also thank the administration for saving the automotive industry. My former employer was 4 hours from filing bankruptcy on the day the administration came out and backstopped the suppliers to get paid when Chrysler and GM went into bankruptcy. So my question is, I'm a conservative. I'm not enthused about my party's candidate for the reasons that you've mentioned. But what do you say to a conservative that has concerns about increased social welfare in this country? When I think about it, you have workers that have to pass a drug test, but then the government hands out subsidies to people that don't have a job that do drugs. And that's a real philosophical inconsistency in my mind. I'd love to vote for the candidate that you're proposing and supporting, but I'm concerned about increased social welfare, making more people not willing to work.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. What I would say is, in terms of the Hillary, is she's a very practical person and has worked well across the aisle. And in other times, you would hear that from John McCain or Lindsey Graham or any of the others. Secondly, in dealing with something I'm familiar with, I'm part of the campaign for pre-college tuition. Based on my experiences with watching skyrocketing tuition and skyrocketing debt, I think you could consolidate a lot of federal programs and provide not entirely free college tuition, but go a long way to encouraging that. What I thought was interesting was Bernie just basically said, we'll do it, period, and without really knowing where he'd get the money. Hillary actually has a plan for free college tuition, but it requires the states to pony up money. It requires the students to work 8 hours a week. It requires some responsibility and not just the handout. And I hope that's an example of the kind of thing you're hoping you'll see more of, instead of just trying to throw money at everything and promise everybody everything. It's not a perfect answer, but what I'm saying, though, is accurate.
Governor, it raises an interesting question. One of the things that seems to be very difficult now is working with Congress. And I know people talk about the two presidential candidates having high negative ratings, but Congress would kill for ratings that good because they're just so unpopular. How do we get Congress to function again? in support of any
Yeah.
agenda, really.
Well, I mentioned reapportionment really is important, and I think we do need to get money out of politics. And I wish I had an easy answer because, you know, I come from a different era. As much as I'm very much involved in Michigan with our two senators and Hillary Clinton and the mayor of Detroit, and actually I work with Governor Snyder on two projects, the bridge and the Center for Intelligent Vehicles, our Republican governor. We're a different breed. Yesterday morning, we had the annual meeting of the former members of Congress, and we meet once a year, and we go to the floor of the House, and we sit, and we have a session. There were about 70 of us there yesterday, both parties, and we sit back and bask in our reflective, glorious memories of being in Congress and feeling like we were in the center of the universe there. And everybody bemoaned the mood. Paul Ryan came in and bemoaned the mood. Steny Hoyer came in and talked to us, and he, you know, the mood. But my answer is, I think today, because politics has become tribal, and you support anybody in your party, even if they're a killer. I mean, you know, it's, nobody's done that yet, but I mean, the point is they're so tribal. I think that people are going to Congress programmed to fight. When I ran for Congress, really all these now, 42 years ago and was elected, I went there looking forward to working with everyone, trying to help, you know, idealistically create a better world, work with the world, help the Great Lakes, help jobs in Michigan. Gerald Ford was president. I voted to sustain his first veto, and immediately I had the White House whining and dining me and treating me like a really good guy. We were programmed to go there to work with each other, and when we had an orientation, Mo Udall, a Democrat, prominent Democrat, said to us, be careful not to demonize the Republicans on your committees. We had a big majority, because they may be opposing you on one thing, but you may need them on something else. And so don't get too personal with these people. I remember in those days, none of us would introduce a bill if we were serious unless we had someone from the other party on the same bill to show it had credibility. But we went there with a reverence for our system. We went there with a respect for the institution of the House of Representatives, and senators went there with a respect for the Senate and a reverence for the White House and the country, the Supreme Court. That's gone with a lot of people. And I'm really tired of people who say they love their country, but they hate their government. Well, it's our government. And I think poor John Boehner, who everyone likes and respects, left because he was frustrated, because he had a small group in his caucus that would stop him from cooperating. And all it does, of course, is polarize the Democrats, who then get into name-calling. So it's not a good situation, but I think we've got to find a way to educate and encourage people who are elected before they arrive not to think they're going into battle, but going in to serve.
Well, Governor, I think we would be lucky if we had your ilk running things again. I appreciate your support for a candidate and your honesty in politics, and not demonizing either side, but sharing with us a perspective that we really do need in politics today. We were lucky to have you when we had you. We're lucky we still have you. I don't mean you've passed away or anything.
Not yet, anyway.
But I think you've reminded us all about the class that used to be involved in leadership that you still carry and still are there to inspire the younger generation. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you very much.